Body Worlds, also known as Body Worlds, the original exhibition of real human bodies, is a traveling exhibition of human and animal bodies that are preserved by a technique known as plastination. What is plastination? Mary Roach, author of New York Times bestseller Stiff, who visited a plastination lab, writes that it, quote, is the process of taking organic tissue and replacing the water in it with a liquid silicone polymer, and eventually you get something like this. So who's behind it all? This man, German pathologist Gunther von Hagens, credited for not only inventing the technique of plastination, but also creating the first exhibition of plastinated human bodies that we now simply know as Body Worlds. Anyway, so you have this guy who can shoot some fluid into dead bodies, he makes them pretty, he displays them. Why do we care? Well, we care because they're real dead bodies, gosh darn it. We respect our dead, mostly, and there's a big issue that Body Worlds is exploitative in nature, be it financially or simply on the grounds of, quote, violated dignity, unquote, as Roach writes in Stiff. Alright, so with all that background information, the main point is that I don't believe it's exploitation. In fact, quite the opposite. Firstly, all bodies and parts of bodies displayed are obtained with full consent. As stated on the official Body Worlds website, the bodies, quote, belong to people who declared during their lifetime that their bodies should be made available after their deaths, unquote. Secondly, I think there's a very serious contribution that Body Worlds makes to society. What is it? Education. It educates us in the sense that it makes us aware of what's happening inside of us through the exploration of a real physical human body, something that, as stated by von Hagens in a British Red Cross interview, quote, was up to now only possible to see behind closed doors for the professionals, unquote. Additionally, he stated, quote, I would like to increase health consciousness by comparing healthy and diseased organs, unquote. So indeed, the purpose of Body Worlds, as stated by the official himself, is to educate those using a two-pronged approach. However, it's likely that many of you are still unconvinced of this, and rightfully so, since you might be saying, well, that's not education, that's simply self-promotion. And yes, you wouldn't be alone in saying that, because Body Worlds is challenged on its educational value. In fact, what better place to contest education than at the so-called ivory tower of academia? Here we have an article from Annals of Anatomy, a peer-reviewed scientific journal. The article itself is a statement from Anatomische Gesellschaft, an international society for the anatomical sciences, and it reads, quote, anatomical investigations follow strict scientific rules. Modern anatomy consists not only of macroscopic examination of the body, but by using modern techniques. It also analyzes cells and molecules as essential players in any physiological or pathological process. This conceptual integration is central to understanding and teaching of modern anatomy. The Body World show of Dr. von Hagens severely violates these principles of the Anatomische Gesellschaft, unquote. This article raises an important point regarding the applicability of Body Worlds in teaching, and while I respect the meticulousness in describing the normal conventions of teaching anatomy, it seems that this article is creating a profound problem that simply just isn't there. I mean, of course it would violate the principles of an international anatomical society. You see, Body Worlds isn't scientific journal-worthy material. It's a surface-level introduction to the human body meant for lay people. Let's remind ourselves that, as von Hagens stated, we are introducing a part of science previously stowed away from us intellectual mortals for hundreds if not thousands of years. And if you're still not convinced, here's a letter addressing the previous article published in the same academic journal. The author, C. Reddies, writes, quote, the statement misses the point. The high academic and scientific standards advocated in this statement are certainly appropriate for teaching medical personnel. However, such standards exclude the general public from learning about the human body. Body Worlds is conceived for people who can gain only an intuitive, non-academic insight into anatomy, unquote. Now, perhaps you're tired of hearing the opinion of third parties. You're thinking, what about the actual people who visit Body Worlds? Don't they learn anything? Well, of course they do. Another article from the same journal yet again lays out the results of a 1,078-person survey conducted by the University of Regensburg Department of Psychosomatic Medicine, asking about the reactions, attitudes, and viewpoints towards Body Worlds. For starters, let's tackle a more general question. Let's see how many people even think that Body Worlds should stick around. When prompted with the statement, exhibition should not be shown to the public, 94.7%, an overwhelming majority, disagreed. In other words, they would be against the prohibition of Body Worlds. Probing even deeper, the survey asked the reasons for attending the exhibition. By far the most common reason was to have, quote, more knowledge about the structure and function of the body, unquote, with a strong majority, roughly 80%, marking this as a motive. After their visit, 86% considered this accomplished. And when asked to rate the informational content of the exhibition on a scale of 1 to 6, 1 being very good and 6 being unsatisfactory, visitors gave an average grade of 1.89. Lastly, despite the strong emotional impact of the exhibition, as evidenced by some of these percentages, roughly 94% of visitors were fascinated, alluding to what I think is a result of the novelty of an esoteric science being slowly made known to the public, as previously mentioned by von Hagens. Occasionally, the educational effects are far-reaching. Some, like Oregon resident Brad Taylor, have decided to make the effort to quit smoking. Brad started smoking when he was 19 and claims the problem got so bad that he never hugged his kids because he was self-conscious about the smell of smoke on himself. Fortunately, Brad had already been on the road to quitting, but didn't confirm it until he saw this. Indeed, according to Dr. Angelina Whaley, creative and conceptual designer of Body Worlds, quote, many visitors to the exhibition reported that they had tried everything, but only stopped after seeing the smoker's lung, unquote. So at the end of the day, it might still be about a crazy guy who decided to shoot plastic into corpses and display them all around the country. Yeah, so he made a couple bucks off of it, and maybe it's artistic, but if there's one thing you can't deny, it's that it's educational, and Brad's story is just one example of somebody who's benefited tremendously from it.